We are tonight starting a Thanksgiving series. Now, I've been doing this. This is the third year that I've done it, third year in a row that I've done it. So we will not be in Colossians tonight like we normally would be. What we will do is on Sunday, we will finish Ruth because we didn't get to do that this last Sunday. But Sundays and Wednesdays leading up to Thanksgiving, we'll be looking at different Psalms. And these are Psalms that are the studies that are focused on giving thanks. So that's what we will be, that's our theme. Why? Why are we doing that? Anybody know why we've got a theme of giving thanks? Seriously? Josiah, thank you. Because Thanksgiving's coming up. And isn't that funny? Like you ask a question, you guys are like, I don't know what's going on. But yeah, because Thanksgiving is coming up. Now, what about Thanksgiving? What about that? Well, I'm going to, I mentioned a moment ago that I've got quite a lengthy intro. I'm going to be reading to you. And I will be reading some history for you. Get a little bit of a history lesson here about giving thanks to God. And we're going to focus on two separate events that were about 200 years apart from one another. But let me read something to you. And in fact, what I'm going to read to you right now, let me just show you something. Wallbuilders.com. How many of you have heard of wallbuilders.com? All two of us, Lisa and I. Okay, you need to make sure that you write that down, wallbuilders.com. It is just chock full of history, and you may go, you know what? Oh man, I hate history. A lot of you, there are some of you, I should say, not a lot of you, but some of you hate history. However, this is biblical history or a godly history, and it's specifically has to do with history here in the United States, but the Christian influence. And you will find, David Barton is the one that heads up Wall Builders. This man has spent literally years, buying he actually owns historic documents, like full-on documents that you go, well, that should be in a museum. Yeah, he's like got his own museum pretty much, and he actually owns these documents. So when he's speaking about American history and the godly influence, he's not just making stuff up. He's got a document, and he'll tell you, oh yeah, this happened in 1652, and you go, how do I know that? Oh, because I have the document right here. And he'll pull that up and he'll read it to you. It's incredible. And so as our history is being challenged every single day and being questioned every day and being changed every day, this is an excellent source for you and I to go back to and to go, wait a minute, what's the truth? And let me see the document. And you can pull those things up. It's an incredible website. So let me read something to you that was taken from wallbuilders.com. The tradition of Thanksgiving as a time to focus on God and his blessings was introduced by European Americans. You go, what? What is that? Yeah. Europeans were the first one to come over here, right? They were, or not the first ones to come over here, but they came over here, right, from Europe, and became Americans eventually. And it dates back well over 4 centuries in America. It is primarily from the Pilgrims' Thanksgiving celebration of 1621. No, I was not alive then. That we derive, it's from their celebration in 1621 that we derive our current tradition of Thanksgiving Day. The Pilgrims, these were known as separatists. This set of Protestants, so they were Protestants, called Pilgrims. They were considered to be separatists because they separated themselves. Here's why. This set of Protestants believed they would be unable to reform the Church of England, and therefore they needed to separate and form their own church. They set sail in the Mayflower for America on September 6th, 1620. and for 2 months braved the harsh elements of a storm-tossed sea. The Pilgrims had originally obtained a land grant for Virginia, so when they took off, they were given a land grant that could go and claim some land in Virginia. But after a rough ocean crossing, they landed some 200 miles north of Virginia in what became known as Massachusetts. On November 11th, 1620, they finally dropped anchor and came ashore. Upon disembarking at Plymouth Rock, they held a prayer service. First thing they did, they held a prayer service and then hastily began building shelters. However, they were unprepared for a harsh New England winter, and nearly half of them died before spring. Emerging from that grueling winter, the Pilgrims were surprised when an Indian, if that's offensive to you, you can say, American was Native American. Sorry, thank you very much. Native American, but it wasn't American. Anyways, an Indian named Samoset approached them and greeted them in their own language, explaining to them that he had learned English from fishermen and traders. Now, just a quick note, how strange. They were headed for Virginia. They end up 200 miles north, and out of the forest comes an Indian speaking English. What a coinkydink. A week later, Samoset returned with a friend named Squanto, who lived with the Pilgrims and accepted their Christian faith. Squanto taught the Pilgrims much about how to survive in the New World, and he and Samoset helped forge a long-lasting peace treaty between the Pilgrims and the other Indians, the Wampanoag Indians. Pilgrim Governor William Bradford described Squanto as a special instrument sent of God for our good, and never left us till he died. In 1621, that summer, the Pilgrims, still persevering in prayer and assisted by their Indian neighbors, reaped a bountiful harvest. The grateful Pilgrims, therefore, declared a 3-day feast in December 1621 to thank God and to celebrate with their generous friends. This was America's first Thanksgiving festival. 90 of those Indians joined the 50 Pilgrims from these 3 days for these 3 days of feasting, play, and prayer. Pilgrim Edward Winslow, who was later the governor of Plymouth, wrote about this time. Here's what he wrote. They've actually got the document. Our harvest being gotten in, our governor sent 4 men on fowling. Keep in mind, we're talking about, hundreds of years ago. So what it means is that the governor said, hey, you 4 guys go out and kill some birds that we can eat, that we can celebrate with. Okay? Fowling. That so we might, after a special manner, rejoice together after we had gathered the fruit of our labor. So at the end of harvest. They 4 in one day killed as much as, with a little help beside, served the company almost a week. So in other words, they had enough food to last them a week, all of that whole crew. At which time, amongst other recreations, we exercised our arms. That means they practiced shooting. Many of the Indians coming amongst us, and among the rest, their great king, Massasoit, with some 90 men, whom for 3 days we entertained and feasted. And they went out and killed 5 deer, which they brought to the plantation, and bestowed on our governor and upon the captain and others. And although it be not always so plentiful as it was at this time with us, yet by the goodness of God we are so far from want. Now what happens at that point is, the following year there's a drought. Actually, it wasn't the following year. It was in 1623. So 2 years later, there's a drought. Crops are not doing well. They all gathered up and prayed. And very soon after that, it actually began to rain. and of course replenished their gardens and their crops, and things began to grow once again. They saw it as miraculous. They note, again, Governor Bradford notes that the Indians that were there were just, their minds were blown. Like, man, you guys just prayed and now all of a sudden it's raining. God was answering their prayers. But here's what came out of that. Here's what they did. They made it a habit in the spring of prayer and fasting. So, Lord, bless what we're about to do. We're going to plant our crops. Please bless it. Then at the end of that, they made it a habit. They started this new thing where they prayed and gave thanks. And then that became a habit for them every year. Now, we fast forward 200 years, and what happens is matter of fact, let's see, what did I do with it? Give me 1 minute. There was a woman who was saying, she was writing to all the presidents, and she's like, hey, we need to have an official day of giving thanks. And she kept writing to all the different presidents. Finally, Abraham Lincoln responds and says, you know what, that's a great idea. We should do that. And he makes it an official holiday. And here is his, what's called the Proclamation of Thanksgiving. It was given in 1863. Here's what it says. The year, and this is a president of the United States, okay? The year that is drawing towards its close has been filled with the blessings of fruitful fields and healthful skies. To these bounties, which are so constantly enjoyed that we are prone to forget the source from which they come. Others have been added, which are of so extraordinary in nature that they cannot fail to penetrate and soften even the heart, which is habitually insensible to the ever-watchful providence of Almighty God. He writes, in the midst of a civil war that was going on at that time, in the midst of a civil war of unequaled magnitude and severity, which has sometimes seemed to invite and provoke the aggressions of foreign states, peace has been preserved with all nations. Order has been maintained. The laws have been respected and obeyed, and harmony has prevailed everywhere except in the theater of military conflict, while that theater has been greatly contracted by the advancing armies and navies of the Union. He goes on, the needful diversions of wealth and strength from the fields of peaceful industry to the national defense have not arrested the plow, the shuttle, or the ship. In other words, they've continued to prosper. He goes on to say, the axe has enlarged the borders of our settlements and the mines, as well of iron and coal, as of the precious metals, have yielded even more abundantly than heretofore. Population has steadily increased, notwithstanding the waste that has been made in the camp, the siege and the battlefield in the country, rejoicing in the consciousness of augmented strength and vigor, is permitted to expect continuance of years with large increase of freedom. No human counsel hath devised, nor hath any mortal hand worked out these great things. These are the gracious gifts of the Most High God, who, while dealing with us in anger for our sins, hath nevertheless remembered mercy. It has seemed to me fit and proper that they should be solemnly, reverently, and gratefully acknowledged as with one heart and voice by the whole American people. I do therefore invite my fellow citizens in every part of the United States, and also those who are at sea, and those who are sojourning in foreign lands, to set apart and observe the last Thursday of November next as a day of thanksgiving and prayer to our beneficent Father who dwelleth in the heavens. And he's got more to write there. But I brought those two things up because most often, when it comes to Thanksgiving, the first thing we think is food. Food. And that's okay. Food is a good thing, and I love the food part, and the turkey and the ham and all the different things, especially the mac and cheese and all the different things. I love all of that. However, you and I, as people of God, we want to make sure that we understand that we are thanking God for food, yes, and so much more. Now we turn to Psalm 97 to get obviously some biblical direction here. Let me show you what I did with Psalm 97. I did break this up there. It's not very long. There are not very many verses, but let me show you what I got. We are going to see a declaration of praise, verse 1. We are going to see a description of power in verses 2 through 6. And then we will see a direct address, or addresses, I should say, to two groups of people and to God. And so let's start with that declaration of praise. It's one verse. Notice what the psalmist says. I mean, right out of the gate, he explodes with this: the Lord reigns. No question about it. We know what's on his mind, what's on his heart. He wants everyone to know that the Lord reigns. Now, I'm assuming that most of you were here on Sunday, and so you may remember the Lord, all caps, remember that? But we see immediately here the sovereignty of God. He reigns, meaning he's the king over everything. So the psalmist immediately just breaks forth with that right out of the gate. The Lord reigns. So he's declaring, he's praising. And then what he does is he speaks to the earth and, interestingly, to the isles. Let's look at those. Let the earth rejoice. Now, does anybody know what the word rejoice? I was reading through this and it was funny. I mean, I just assumed that, well, yeah, rejoice, that just means to be happy or something, or to be full of joy. What does rejoice mean? Does anybody know what that actually means? Okay, it means to gladden. So what the psalmist is saying is, let the earth gladden itself with the Lord, in the fact that the Lord reigns. So let the earth rejoice. So, I mean, do you understand what he's doing here? Look where he starts. The Lord reigns. So he immediately starts with God in heaven reigning over everything. That's the biggest thing that you and I are aware of, that we're familiar with, that we know about. It's like, well, nothing's bigger than God in heaven. I mean, that's the ultimate. Well, then what he does is he goes and he says, okay, well, what's the next biggest thing? The earth, I guess. And that's exactly what he does. Let the earth rejoice. So just the entire earth, everything that's on it, everyone that's in it. Let everything that has breath praise the Lord. You ever thought about that? I think we talked about that in here. Let everything that has breath. I mean, squirrels have breath. Are we talking about? I mean, how far are we taking this? Well, the psalmist says, "Let the whole earth rejoice," and then let the multitude of isles be glad. I-S-L-E-S. These are not the aisles in Walmart. Okay, we're talking about islands. You go, what? That's not something that we hear really at all when we're going through the Psalms or even through the Bible. We don't hear a lot about the isles. So the islands, he's saying, let the multitude of islands be glad. What he is saying here, the point that the psalmist is trying to make is, everybody is as far as you can reach, as far as you can go, as far as you can think. I mean, we're talking about God reigns. So just let the whole earth and all of the isles, all of the hidden islands, the islands that nobody's ever been to, or they can't land at because it's too dangerous, or that are uninhabited. He says what he's trying to point out is he's encouraging everybody, everywhere, the entire earth should praise the Lord because he reigns. Because he reigns. Now, let's move on to the second part. Let's look at the description of power here. Verse 2, clouds and darkness surround him. Now that sounds terrifying. Clouds and darkness surround him. And that's exactly what the psalmist is trying to convey here. That God, there is a side to God, we might say, that he is terrifying. We'll talk some more about that, but look what he says. Clouds and darkness surround him. Righteousness and justice, those are good things, are the foundation of his throne. That's pointing out that God is right and that he is just, or that he's fair. So we have in one part of the verse 2 there, the first part is saying he's terrifying. What the psalmist is trying to convey is that he is terrifying or powerful. He reigns. He's right and he's just. And those things, the righteousness and the justice, those are the foundation of his throne. That's what he rules from. This is reminiscent. This section here from verses 2 to 6 really is a reminder of the past, but even prophetic, meaning that it points to the future also, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But the first thing I want to point out is that it's a reminder of the past. Some of you have read through, some of you have been with me, we have been through the story of the Exodus and Sinai, and you may remember that when they got to the mountain to Sinai, and God says, hey Moses, get up here, I want to give you these stones, because they were going to be the 10 Commandments. One of the things that was happening at that time is that the mountain was engulfed in a cloud, and there was clouds and darkness. There was also lightning and thunder, and the people were terrified to even approach the mountain. In fact, God had said, nobody should come and touch the mountain, not even your animals. Everybody should stay away. And so it's reminiscent of Sinai. The writer, no doubt, knows the history and knows that, oh yeah, this is how God presented himself to the children of Israel on Sinai. He goes on in verse 3 to say, a fire goes before him and burns up his enemies round about, pointing out the fact that God judges. He's fair, he's just, his judgment is righteous, but he judges. And his enemies are going to be devoured in that fire. His lightnings light the world. That's pretty incredible. We do not get to see a lot of lightning around here. I mean, every once in a while we get a really good storm, and then you could just see off in the distance, lightning, is streaking across the sky. Pretty incredible, because it'll light up for a second, maybe our area. But it's not like universal. And here he's describing the lightnings that accompany God. They light up the entire world. His lightnings light the world. The earth sees and trembles. So again, the fact that God can be terrifying to his enemies. Things will change when we get into our third section. In case you're wondering, like, man, this is scary. It'll change for the better. But let's finish reading here. Verse 5. The mountains melt like wax at the presence of the Lord. At the presence of the Lord of the whole earth. The heavens declare his righteousness, and all the peoples see his glory. Incredible things that we learn there about God. Now, I told you that this section is reminiscent of what happened in the past. Sinai, the cloud, the clouds, fire, lightning, thunder, darkness, all of those things, terrifying. But it's also prophetic. You and I have probably read some of these things. In Revelation 16, beginning in verse 17, it says, Then the seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple of heaven from the throne, saying, It is done. And there were noises and thunderings and lightnings. And there was a great earthquake, such a mighty and great earthquake as had not occurred since men were on the earth. Now the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And great Babylon was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. And in verse 20, Revelation 16:20, then every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. That's future. So as the psalmist is writing or penning Psalm 97, he's reminiscing about what he's heard about God in the past, Sinai, and how terrifying God can be. And whether the psalmist knew it or not, he's also prophesying, giving us some clues about what's going to happen in the future. And we see that there in Revelation 16, verses 17 through 20, as John was, taking notes and writing down what God was revealing to him. So these are past, things of the past, things of the future, consistent. These are things that accompany God. Now, the last section is the direct addresses, where the writer of Psalm 97 speaks to some specific groups of people. Verse 7. He first speaks to, and I'm going to put it up there for you, verse 7, idolaters. Let all be put to shame who serve carved images, who boast of idols. Worship him, all you, lowercase g, gods. He's calling even the idols, the false gods, and saying, yeah, all of you are going to bow down to God. But let all be put to shame who serve carved images, who boast of idols. I mean, think about this, after what we just read about God, how nature bends to his will, how he's characterized or accompanied by all of these things, why in the world would anybody worship a carved image? Why would you get a god and carve it out yourself out of a piece of wood or some stone or whatever, and then worship that? It's just an item that sits on the shelf or sits on the altar, and it just sits there. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't move. It doesn't talk. It doesn't hear you. It doesn't answer prayers. It has nothing. It has no power over lightning or thunder or darkness or clouds. None of it. So that's the point that he's making there. All these things that we just read about God. Why in the world would you worship an idol? That's why he says, "Let all be put to shame." He says, "What a shame." You're worshiping this inanimate object, and you could have a relationship with God. Now, you might go, well, yeah, but that God sounds terrifying. Again, it'll change here in just a moment. But the next group that he talks to are not really a group, but he talks to the Lord himself. He says, Zion hears and is glad. That's another name for Israel, another name for Jerusalem. Zion hears and is glad. And the daughters of Judah rejoice because of your judgments, O Lord. Keep in mind that these are the Psalms, and we get some little bit of poetry in there too. It's not just the daughters of the tribe of Judah that rejoice, it's everybody. But that was a common phrase or a common saying, and he uses that just in a poetic way to say that people are rejoicing. So the daughters of Judah rejoice. Why? Because of your judgments, O Lord. Because of the judgments. Now pause just for a moment. The daughters of Judah are rejoicing because of what? Not because of a table full of good food and family and friends over, and you get to drink some apple cider, sparkling apple cider. The psalmist is saying that people are rejoicing not because of what they have or what's in front of them on the table, but because of who God is. And that's the theme running through this psalm, is that we're praising God because what? Because he reigns. Not because of something he's given me, but because he reigns. We're praising God. Why? Because he's powerful. Obviously, there's lightning and thunder and darkness and clouds and all of those things. The islands, the mountains are melting like wax. So we're thankful to God for who he is. And then for the fact that we belong to him. Right? We're not his enemies. We're his people. And he goes on in verse 9 to say, for you, Lord. Now he's speaking to the Lord here. He did that in verse 8, speaking to, O Lord, directly to the Lord. For you, Lord, are most high above all the earth. Remember how he started? The Lord reigns. Here he is. You are most high above all the earth. You are exalted far above all gods. Again, lowercase g, that's the false gods, or any earthly men that may consider themselves gods, rulers. He says, God, you're way above them. Now, let me tell you why that is so good. Because if God were simply an earthly God, bound by earth, in other words, if he was just here, then could he really handle our earthly issues, our earthly problems? The fact that God reigns and that he is, in verse 9, high above all the earth, means that whatever's going on here, he can handle it. He's got it covered. He's got the power to deal with those things. For you, Lord, are most high above all the earth. You are exalted far above all gods. He talks to one last group here, and that's you and I, lovers of the Lord, those who love the Lord. Look what he says in verse 10. You who love the Lord. That's you and I. We love the Lord. He's going to tell us to do three things here. The first one is, you who love the Lord, hate evil. It's a command. He tells us, hate evil. Now, that's a problem for us, right? Because we don't always hate evil. There's a lot of evil that we do hate. The problem is we don't hate all evil. Some of it we embrace. Some of it we play around with. Some of it we invite into our lives, and that becomes a problem for us. We get caught up in sin. But the command there is that if we love the Lord, we need to hate evil. He goes on to tell us about God. He preserves the souls of his saints. S-O-U-L-S. He's not talking about the bottom of your shoes. Okay? Your souls. This is great news. You know, you are, believe it or not, you're getting older. Everybody in here. Now, you're much younger than I am, but you're getting older. Your body, believe it or not, your body it's wearing out. And you go, well, it's not wearing out yet. Well, no, you don't see it yet, but it's on its way. That's what happens. It's natural. The good news is that our souls are preserved. The most important part of who we are. He preserves the souls of his saints. Again, that's you and I. He delivers them out of the hand of the wicked. Great news. When the wicked try to trap us, God delivers us from their hand. Verse 11, light is sown for the righteous, and gladness for the upright in heart. Again, those are titles that are being used for people that love the Lord, the righteous and the upright in heart. But notice what he does. Light is sown for the righteous. Light is sown. Sown is talking about planting things. What he's saying is that God plants light for us. In other words, he's providing, again, it's poetic, he's providing light for us. You go, okay, well, that's pretty neat. Yeah, it's incredibly neat, and I'll tell you why. Because back up in verse 2, clouds and darkness surround him. And that sounds terrifying. Well, it is if you do not belong to him. But if you do belong to him, what is he doing for you? You're not experiencing those clouds and darkness. What you are experiencing is light that he has provided for you. Verse 11. Light is sown for the righteous, and gladness for the upright in heart. And then he says in verse 12, I told you that he tells us to do three things. The first one was hate evil. Verse 12 has the next two things. Here's the second one. Rejoice in the Lord. Rejoice in the Lord. This is what he's telling us there is, remember, gladden. Rejoice is gladden. What he's saying is gladden yourself in the Lord. In other words, find your joy in the Lord. Is there joy in a table filled with food? Absolutely there is. Is there joy in a glass of sparkling apple cider? Absolutely there is. Is there joy in just a good-sized slice of pumpkin pie after dinner? Absolutely there is. But those things are all temporary, secondary things. If I find myself on Thanksgiving afternoon, evening, all alone eating a bologna sandwich. Do I have any less to be thankful for? No, because this psalm is not talking to us about things that we possess and we own and we can touch and we can taste. It's talking to us about who God is and telling us that we need to be thankful for God. Rejoice in the Lord. Find your joy in the Lord. That's the secret. If you can figure out how to find your joy in the Lord, and the way that you do that is not really a secret for us. We've learned it in this psalm, is to know who God is, to have a relationship with him. Rejoice in the Lord, so that whether you have a lot, you rejoice, and whether you don't, doesn't matter, because you still have a lot, you've got the Lord. Rejoice in the Lord, you righteous. Here's the third thing that he tells us, and give thanks. There's our theme right there. Give thanks. For what? At the remembrance of his holy name, or his holiness. You go, but wait a minute, where's the mashed potatoes? Where's the gravy? Where's the cranberry sauce? Where's the stuff that we're talking about Thanksgiving? Aren't we supposed to be talking about a turkey and all the different, all the fixings? No. Giving of thanks, we certainly want to be thankful when we're at that table eating in a couple of weeks. But even if you find yourself somewhere else, not at a table full of food, you still can rejoice and be thankful for what? For the remembrance of his holy name. And we go, well, what do you mean? How do you remember his holy name? You go to Psalm 97 and you go, look, God is holy. Look at all of these things that we learned about him, who he is, what he does, what accompanies him. This is, he's just, he's right. All of these things, let me be thankful for him. Not just for what he's provided, but just for the fact of who he is and the fact that we have a relationship. I've got a relationship with God. What an incredible thought. What an incredible thought that I've got a relationship with God. So, may you and I, as we head into the next couple of weeks, Thanksgiving, you look forward to the food and family and do that. Absolutely. It's all part of the holiday. But let's you and I remember what the holiday is all about. It's about giving thanks to God. And it's not just, it's primarily an American holiday, but thanking God is not just American, right? That transcends time and nations and people and locations. We're giving thanks to God primarily for who he is, and then for what he's given us. Father, thank you so much for your word.